Hello there. About 2 months ago, I released my videos around the Boox Mini C, which is an 8-inch, technically 7.8-inch reader, released by Boox that has Kaleido 3, which is the latest color technology for e-ink screens. And I had some very favorable reviews around that, and a lot of people still are viewing those videos. They're my most popular so far in the young history of my channel. And so I was asked by one of the viewers if I could do kind of a 2-month update and see how I'm using the device, see if maybe any of my opinions have changed or what have you. And that's what this video is for. It'll be a fairly short video, predominantly because a lot of the things that I said in my original videos, well, in fact, all the things really, still hold. My opinion actually hasn't changed much at all. So what am I going to talk about here? Well, we're going to start off focusing on, well, what do I actually use this device for? So over these 2 months, what have I really been using? And what have I not been using? That's kind of interesting too. So we'll talk about both of those things. We'll talk a little bit about battery life. And I did an extensive video around that, but I'll just add just a couple additional thoughts. And then finally, we'll talk about a couple of the cons that I've, kind of come to realize with the device since the review. So we'll just kind of round out the original videos that I put together and give an update, which I hope folks will find helpful. Okay, so with that in mind, let's get to it. So, what do I use the device for? So my predominant use is as an e-reader. So I'm mostly reading novels. I'm on a little bit of a science fiction kick. I'm reading novels of the year that received the Nebula Award. So I've been going through those, first with Ursula Le Guin and Arthur Clarke and others. So that's been kind of what I've been doing predominantly with the device, using the Kobo app. Occasionally the Kindle app as well, but I prefer the Kobo app for reasons I won't go into here. Although I will say here that it seems to be a little more battery efficient, at least the version that's associated with Android 11. So that's my number one thing. I'm doing novel reading, essentially, on this device. The second thing I'm doing is I'm doing a little bit of magazine reading. I've got the Flipster app, and we talked about that in the initial reviews. Some people have asked, well, how can you read magazines when they're normally on, a normal, say, A4 paper format, and you're reading on essentially an A6 paper format, which is much smaller? And the answer is that you can do pinch to zoom on the Mini C just fine. It's a little finicky on that particular app, the Flipster app. So you've got to have a certain way of scrolling it or else it kind of jumps around on you. But once you get used to that, it's quite easy. You just double tap, it zooms in on a column, and then you can read from there and you scroll as you're reading the column. So it's pretty easy to read. Would a larger device be better for reading magazines? I suppose it would, but I'm keeping my reader, my Mini C, on my nightstand, and so it's nice to have a smaller thing there. And I'm generally reading from home. Sometimes I take it downstairs and read in the backyard and that sort of thing. But that's pretty much what I'm doing. So reading books, reading magazines. Some of the things that I'm not doing with it, and I should point out, I mentioned just a second ago that I have this device on my nightstand. I also have an Android tablet on my nightstand as well. It sits in a dock. It's actually my night clock. I use that device when I go work out. I stick it on my elliptical and then listen to Bluetooth and have my heart rate monitor connected to that device. So I've got basically these two devices, this Android tablet along with the Mini C, and those are both sitting right there. So what I find is that when I am doing other types of reading activities, and these are things like looking over Google News or web browsing, I could do those things on the Mini C, but I'm preferring to do them on this tablet, which is, I can't remember the exact name. I think it's the Samsung S5e or something like that. It's a 4-year-old tablet, but it still has a wonderful screen, very responsive, and I just find it better for any type of scrolling or searching activities than I think that the e-ink device is. For reading, I vastly prefer the Mini C over the tablet. I would never read a book on the tablet. I'd read on the Mini C every day of the week. So that's how I kind of split things out. So I do some reading on magazines and books on the Mini C, and I'm doing web pages and Google News and sites like that on my tablet. So that's how I kind of split it out. For me, just to put that in a bit of context, I don't read off of an e-ink screen because I have eye strain necessarily. I read off of an e-ink screen because I just prefer the experience. I did a poll about a month ago asking folks why they used e-ink screens, and those were the two predominant reasons. One was for those people that had eye strain, but the other is just people that prefer the technology, and that's where I stand. So those are the predominant things that I've done with the tablet since having purchased it and having reviewed it. Now, talking real quickly about the battery life, I am using it intermittently. The way I read is I read in massive spurts. So I get really into books, read 2 or 3 books at a time, and then I'll stop reading for long periods of time. And I'm actually in a bit of a lull now. So I'm picking it up maybe once a week, doing a little bit of reading. That's about it. So I don't, I'm not really as intense as I was, say, back in July. So generally speaking, just from a practical day-to-day basis, I think that the battery life is really good because the standby time is so great that I can have these large gaps of time, still pick up the device, and it's got plenty of juice to get me through. I think I've charged it maybe a week or 2 weeks ago, and I'm still in the 60s in terms of the battery life. So the battery life is perfectly acceptable to me. But again, I'm not using it intensely. I'm not, doing full days or multiple hours of use at a time with the device. I'm using it sporadically. And for that purpose, it's holding the battery life quite well. Now, I wanted to talk about a couple things that were cons about the device I didn't mention in previous reviews. I'm hoping the camera can pick these up. I've got the device right here. Let me pick it up. And the first thing is regarding the case. Now, in my previous reviews, I talked about the case being one of the best cases I've seen Boox release, and I actually continue to believe that. I think the case is absolutely phenomenal. It feels special when you're holding it. There's just this nice texture to the case. I've seen some comments of folks that talk about the case having kind of an odor, a strong smell. I don't notice that at all. I can't smell the case right now. I have to get right up to it in order to even pick up a scent. And when I do, it's pretty neutral. I don't have a particular concern. So I continue to love the case. The one thing I'm not as sure about, let me put it on the camera here. Yeah, you can see it's a little bit out of focus, but right here on this lip right here, I'm a little concerned with that fabric. I'm concerned that over time, this edge of the fabric will start to fray a bit. And let's see if we can put that more into focus. So it doesn't look like it's doing that now, but you have to come in and you have to grab this, right? Let's see if I get a good angle on it. You have to grab it like this and pry it off. I just wonder if we're going to start to see some wear on this edge of this flap as a result of that. As you saw so far, it's holding up quite well, but there's just some signs it's, it might be prone to fraying at some point in the future. So I guess I wouldn't call it a con because it hasn't happened yet, but it just seems like that's going to happen eventually. The more that I'm using the case, and I always have the case on when it's in storage, and then I usually just take the device out when it's out of storage, and you can just pry it off the corner and just pop. There you go. You got your case and you got your device, and then pop it back in when I'm done. Super easy. It's such a great case. But I do wonder, and I wonder about whether the case itself seems great. So outside of the flap, I'm not worried about wear and tear. It does gather a bit of dust, and that's not uncommon for a lot of my cases. But that is one con that I can point to. So one thing that is definitely a con that I did not pick up in my initial reviews was around front lighting. And there's this odd issue where the front lighting is a little bit inconsistent on the top bar, although it's not an issue on the other three sides. And we'll try to show that on camera. But basically, what the result of that is, and it depends on the angle that you're looking at the device. And I'm talking about up here, and it's going to wash out because of the lighting. But basically, what you can get is what I've seen termed as kind of a dirty look near the top side of it. And that's because the lighting isn't perfectly even as it is on the other three sides. Another aspect that we won't be able to see on the video is that if you look at it from a certain angle, albeit an unusual angle than how you normally view the device, you see almost a honeycombing pattern. And it's all because of the same issue, which is the light is more tightly aligned and hidden on three of the sides than it is on the top side. And it's hard to get across in video, but we'll just kind of see if I can give you a glimpse into that. And let's take a look and see if we can get that to focus. There it is. Okay. You can just make it out. There's a bit of the honeycomb. And what you can see is if you look on the top row, you'll see there's these dark spots all across the top. And if you look at the very top of the screen, you can see kind of these little dark areas, like little dark dashes that are just across the very top of the device. And what this is basically is some visibility into the front lighting itself. If I turn it to the side, you don't see it there. If I turn it again, try to get that into focus. That's hard to see there, isn't it? And then we'll try this side. It's not there. It's only on the top that you can see that. And if I scroll, there we go. You can see it there. It doesn't come across the camera as well as it does in real life, but the functional result, the honeycombing effect, is only when you see it at an angle, and that's fine. That's not a concern. But when you're looking at it straight on, what you tend to notice is in the top bar, it's just a little bit darker, and you notice it. You notice it relative to the rest of the screen. You notice it both when you have cold lighting, and you notice it a little bit when you've got warm lighting as well. Let's see if we can see. It's a little hard to see. You can see a little bit on the edges, but it is easier to make out when you've got the device. It's not a deal breaker by any means, but you notice it. And you notice it in particular when you're reading a book, because you're used to seeing a pretty uniform page, and then the lighting's just a little bit off. It's something you need to adjust to. And you can. It's not, again, it's not the biggest problem in the world, but the ideal would be that it wouldn't be there. And based on conversations on Reddit, this basically is inherent in a lot of the Mini C screens. So, and that goes back to the manufacturer e-ink. At least that's what other folks have posted. So that is a con to the device. I would prefer that the lighting be more uniform around the top. In fact, if anything, I would have preferred, if it had to have that issue, I don't know why it would have to have it, but if it did, I would prefer that to be at the bottom as opposed to the top. But anyway, so that is something new that I have identified over time in using the device. The one thing I will say, though, that outside of that, it still remains, the front lighting in particular, still remains quite good. Sometimes, I feel that front lighting changes the experience of e-ink. I prefer reading e-ink without front lighting if I have good ambient light, because I just think e-ink shines without that. But if I need to use front lighting, I certainly do. It's not a problem to use it. And sometimes if you get kind of mid-lighting situation where you just need a little bit of lighting off of the front lighting and you turn it on, it's actually really amazing, and it creates its own cool effect. It's usually, I'm only concerned with front lighting when you have to scale it all the way to full power. which is fine. Again, it's not a problem, but it's not as preferable as reading ink. But there are times when you're less than full power and the front lighting's absolutely fantastic on this device. So just wanted to call that out. So it's mostly good, but a little bit of a blemish there on the top row. And that's really about it. All the other things I've talked about the device still hold true. I still pretty much just use, I think I mainly use fast mode. But again, I don't see much of a difference between fast, balance, or ultra fast. They're all pretty similar to me. And other folks have posted, some folks have posted when I've mentioned that they can see the differences. Other folks said they can't. So, your mileage will vary, unfortunately. But I find it's perfectly acceptable to use it that way. You get more graininess when you go on those modes versus an HD mode or a Regal mode. But I think the trade-offs ultimately are worth it, and it's still a really nice device. So that's my 2-month kind of follow-up review. Basically, just a few notational items to add to the mix, but for the most part, just as great of a device as I thought it was back then, and this is probably my second most used device behind the Supernote, which of course is my daily driver at work. All right, I hope you found this helpful. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments. Until then, I'll see you next time.